the right to form free and independent trade unions, the right to collectively bargain and to strike, and, not least, the fight to end forced labor and child labor. All these trade union rights make up an important part of our human rights. Because the right to work has little meaning if it is not also a right to decent work, without exploitation. Because there can be no social justice in the world without the right to work in safety and dignity. Although nations are now required to respect trade union rights under international conventions, they often fail in their efforts to do so because global companies are so powerful. Regimes that imprison trade unionists, that violate the right to freedom of association, that allow union representatives to be persecuted, are always rotten regimes. And when the trade union movement is threatened, we are in reality all threatened, no matter where in the world this happens. The Svensson International Prize for Trade Union Rights was established in 2010 by Industri Energi. Svensson was the president of the Norwegian Union of Chemical Industry Workers for 17 years and was deeply committed to international trade union work. The goal of the prize is to promote trade union work and trade union rights, nationally as well as internationally. The prize has been awarded annually since its inception in 2010. Each Svensson Prize laureate has confirmed that receiving the prize played a key role in their struggle. For example, the awarding of the prize secured the release of Russian trade union leader Valentin Yurusov. It has enabled the Cambodian Textile Workers Union to build their organization and to unionize more workers. And the Trade Union of Agricultural Workers on South African vineyards to develop their organization and to recruit and unionize more members. The prize has helped teachers in the Philippines to learn about their rights and about what to do if they are harassed by the police and the army. It has enabled Labour Start to step up its work on global solidarity campaigns in support of workers who are persecuted by the authorities and multinational companies throughout the world. Every laureate has benefited from the protection from harm provided by the prize. The trade union movement is international. With strong trade unions, decent working conditions, robust civil societies, and stable institutions in every country, the world will be a safer place for us all.
I leave this poem to my children, for them to learn to love the winds, the sea, the sweet smell of great love, and the trade unions. Without them, we would have nothing. The starving do not see the beautiful, the tired ones are not able to love. I leave this poem to my children, for them to learn to love the winds, the sea, the sweet smell of great love, and the trade unions. Without them, we would have nothing. Good to see you all. Welcome to the 13th award ceremony of the Svensson International Prize for Trade Union Rights. Welcome guests from the international trade union movement, representatives of Norwegian trade unions, solidarity movements, organizations close to us, and to others who are here to celebrate this year's prize winner. After years of pandemic, we are able to celebrate the prize winner as he should be celebrated, not by video, but in person. I started out with a beautiful poem by a Norwegian poet, Stig Holmås, and this poem sums up in a few sentences what the Arthur Svensson Prize is all about. The importance of trade unions for us to have a good life. The Arthur Svensson Prize was established to put the light on and celebrate trade union heroes who fight for workers' rights and organize workers under harsh conditions, who make great sacrifices to make the life better for all of us. Before I leave the floor to the chairman of the prize committee, here is some practical information. Take a good look now at the emergency exit signs in case of an emergency situation. After the speeches, there will be a short break before we will have a concert by the famous percussionist from Mali, Sidiki Camara, and his band. We keep the music hall for ourselves the rest of the evening, so you may stay as long as you want. Smoking is forbidden inside, but in the break and after the concert, you may enjoy your smoke outside the main entrance. Enough of practical information. Then I call upon Frode Alfheim, chairman of the prize committee.
Dear friends and comrades, my name is Frode Alfheim. I am president of the union Industri Energi, and I'm honored to represent the Arthur Svensson International Prize for Trade Union Rights Committee. This committee represents a wider national and international trade union movement. Today is the 13th time the prize is awarded. The prize is presented to a person or organization that has worked predominantly to promote trade union rights and or strengthen trade union organizing around the world. And during these years, the prize has been awarded to trade union heroes all over the world. The first one was Wellington Chibebe from Zimbabwe. Thereafter, strong trade unionists from Palestine, Russia, Mexico, Bahrain, Chile, Cambodia, South Africa, Kazakhstan and Belarus, as well as the global campaigning organization Labor Start. Common for all these prize winners is that they are fighting for basic trade union rights and to organize workers under harsh conditions. This year we have an African prize winner for the third time. We are proud to have George Poe Williams and the union NAHWUL amongst our laureates. Last year, the Free and Independent Union of Belarus received the prize. These unions have been harassed and persecuted by the Lukashenko regime, especially since 2020. 2 months ago, several leaders were arrested, and just a few days ago, the state attorney asked the High Court of Belarus to liquidate all the free and independent unions, as well as criminalize all their activities. The international secretary of the largest union, BNP, Lizaveta Merliak, had to flee the country. She was meant to be here today, but as she now is seeking asylum in Germany, she's not allowed to leave the city of Bremen. But she has sent us a video.
Dear brothers and sisters, I'm Lizaveta Merliak, the International Secretary of the Belarusian Independent Trade Union of Miners and Chemical Workers, a member of the Belarusian Congress of Democratic Trade Unions, BITU. This time last year, our trade union association was awarded the Arthur Svensson Prize. On behalf of BITU, let me welcome the National Health Workers Union of Liberia and personally its General Secretary, Brother George Poe Williams. We wish you, Brother George, the safest and shortest possible return home to a better Liberia with fairer conditions for all, including the health workers. We hope that this prize will add to the efforts of the workers' fight. I wish my brothers and sisters who were taking part in the ceremony last year could have joined me today, but they can't. They are all in prison, facing criminal charges from the authoritarian regime. On 19th of April this year, over 20 union leaders and activists, including Alexander Yarashuk, the president of BITU, Sergei Antusevich, the vice president of BITU, were arrested and taken to KGB prison. They are considered political prisoners now. The chairperson of my union, Belarusian Independent Trade Union of Miners, Maxim Poznyakov, and the chairperson of our union at Belarus-Kali, Alexander Mishuk, were arrested too. This dramatic deterioration of union rights happened soon after BITU publicly opposed the war in Ukraine and presence of Russian troops on Belarusian territory. Moreover, during the International Labour Conference, where the government of Belarus had been widely condemned for the continuous repeated violation of the freedom of association, on 10th of June, the General Prosecutor of Belarus submitted a petition to the Supreme Court to terminate the very existence of BITU and its constituent member unions. Brothers and sisters, similarly to last year, I call upon you not to forget about us and support the workers' fight for justice in our countries, be it Belarus or Liberia. Don't forget the jailed comrades. The fight is on. Solidarity from Belarus.
Lizaveta asked me specially to mention the Labour Start campaign in support of the Belarusian trade unions. She encourages everyone to take part in the online campaign as a solidarity action from every one of us. If you are not familiar with the Labour Start campaign, just Google Labour Start and you will find them. A strong bond exists between organized workers. It is a sense of solidarity that would be hard to describe to those who have never experienced it. A bond that is hard to understand for those who have never been part of the struggle and never stood up for the rights of others. It is the kind of solidarity that does not distinguish between industries or occupation, that does not know color, sexual orientation, or religion, and does not stop at any border. The solidarity between workers can be felt, from the mines in Mexico and Russia to vineyards in South Africa, from the oil rigs of Kazakhstan and textile factories in Cambodia to the classrooms in Bahrain and in the Philippines. Industrial workers in Belarus and health workers in Liberia. What this year's prize winners, NAHWUL and George Poe Williams, have in common with our other laureates is that they have organized strikes, protests, and they have for years stood in the front of the fight for basic rights, decent wages, working conditions, and welfare for workers. Let us watch a short video which gives an impression of George and the health workers' fight.
The health workers' unions intensified their advocacy for better wages and incentives as they were among the underpaid sectors in the country. They had staged a nationwide strike action before the Ebola outbreak, which led to the dismissal of two of their leaders, Joseph Tamba, President, and George Poe Williams, Secretary General. International labor rights groups have led campaigns for the reinstatement of the leaders of the union, as their dismissal is illegal and falls contrary to the Liberia's constitution and labor laws. The labor rights group Public Services International, PSR for short, and the United States' largest healthcare workers union known as SEIU, United Healthcare Workers East. But the government remains vindictive.
Look, let's be very, very clear. The two persons you're talking about were the two leaders of the so-called Health Association, an institution that has never been sanctioned.
The president is in the error because Health Workers Association, in fact the Health Workers Union, has gone through all the requirements put into place by our laws, and we have been registered duly as a trade union institution, and we have been paying our taxes to the government. So we don't understand how come she is saying we are not recognized when for so many years this institution has been into existence.
My position and that of the Ministry of Health is very clear. Nobody says they're not entitled to have a job. They are professional health workers, they're entitled to have a job and work, and nobody will stop them, not even in the public health system. But to go back to those positions of the, what they call themselves, Health Workers Association, and head it, when they led a strike that led to people dying, they cannot go back in those positions. But they can get a job anytime in the health system, and we told them that.
First and foremost, if the president is serious about what she said, then why did she dismiss us? She is saying we are free to work in the public sector, but we were working in the public sector and she dismissed us. So you can see that it's the lip service. The president is not being honest with the people, okay? Secondly, she is not the one to determine who leads the workers. That is interference with the workers' affairs. The workers have decided and they have chosen us to be their leaders.
Her promise seems sugarcoating, as the two are healthcare workers and have no other career. She did not even recognize NAHWUL and cannot give them union status. But the underlying issue is, why did the healthcare workers strike? Certainly, it was for government to mend the weak healthcare system that the Ebola outbreak exposed.
I'm saying that before we can return to work, we need one, our month of August salary, we need our proper equipment to use to work with, and we need insurance benefit, we need extra per diem to motivate us, because our life at risk. We are at the front page. Coming here today is not anything because we choose the profession, as I said. But equally so, if anything happens to us tomorrow, let us be at the stage that our family tomorrow going to not cry alone or cry free.
Collecting the blood samples from the patients posed risks to the healthcare workers getting infected. They fought to save lives with their bare hands in many places. There was no protective equipment to ensure that they are not infected. The healthcare workers continue to be underpaid and most lack adequate labor insurance. Some kept away for their personal safety.
When a serious Ebola pandemic broke out in West Africa in 2014, nurses, doctors, and other health workers were at the forefront of fighting the deadly disease that involved cruel suffering and high mortality. They lacked proper protective equipment, insurance, livable working conditions, and they had poor pay conditions. Public employees do not have the right to unionize and bargain in Liberia. The health workers were organized in the union NAHWUL and demanded to negotiate on behalf of their members. William was at the forefront of demands for better personal protective equipment, compensation for hazardous work, and to ensure that the families of dead health workers were guaranteed support. But the governments saw a growing and more active NAHWUL as a threat and fired him and other key leaders from their jobs in healthcare. This was a clear violation of national laws and global labor rights. After a global campaign with support from the global union Public Services International, George and the others got their jobs back in 2018. NAHWUL then managed to negotiate an understanding with the Liberian government that they should agree on a number of important improvements in the health sector and to give NAHWUL full rights as a trade union, as the first trade union in the public sector. However, the authorities went back on this when the situation calmed down, probably fearing that other public employees would follow and demand the right to bargain. The health workers went out in the streets again in 2020, angry that the authorities would not negotiate with them after all. The government threatened to send security forces into the streets to crack down on their actions. Several union activities in the public sector were harassed and some even brutally killed. Williams was notified that secret police were about to arrest him. He therefore had to flee the country and has since that had to stay outside Liberia. The government's anti-union stance has become tougher since then. The atmosphere remained tense, with constant threats to arrest any trade union activist who agitated for public sector workers' rights. In 2021, Williams was re-elected General Secretary of NAHWUL, despite living in exile. But it's a difficult job. NAHWUL is prohibited from collecting membership fees from members. The union thus has no money to run its own programs and is dependent on solidarity funds. The government continues to refuse to live up to previous obligations to give the union official status and bargaining power and will not enter into dialogue with the union. While the applause from millions of people may be warm, the most effective way to show solidarity and support these health workers is to support trade unions and activists in their fight for workers' rights and to be represented where decisions are made. Dear George Poe Williams, we are deeply impressed by your courage and are honored to stand by you. George is also very active on the international arena, both to fight for health workers and for vaccines to people in poor countries. Watch this video.
While we health workers saw tragedy and death during the pandemic, the CEO of big farmers here at the World Economic Forum saw the chance to pump up profit. They started using monopoly patents to stop others from producing vaccines, slowing global supply. Pfizer's CEO, Albert Bourla, took home more than $20 million in 2021. For me to earn that much money as a nurse, I will have to work every single day in the hospital until 6100 AD.
Today, we are not only celebrating the working people and awarding the Arthur Svensson Prize, we are also making the world smaller. Our movement is an international movement, and leaders of all countries and all businesses must know that we are also a movement of solidarity. An injustice to workers in Liberia is an injustice to all workers, of all nationalities and of all industries and trades. For every year that passes, our eyes are open to new struggles and to new injustice done to working people. Labor rights are fundamental human rights. Labor rights, together with other human rights, from the very core of a civilized society. We are outraged when the freedom to organize and represent the workers is broken. We expect to be respected, and it's not respected when a union is not recognized and not allowed to bargain on behalf of its members. Our message to the authorities of Liberia is that we will not rest until trade unions, also in the public sector, are respected, as well as their leaders and members. Dear George, you and your union are defenders of human rights and labor rights. For this, we honor you with the Arthur Svensson International Prize for Trade Union Rights 2022. So George, would you please come up to the stage and receive the prize?
Comrades, I bring you greetings from the leadership and members of the National Health Workers Union of Liberia, NAHWUL. It is my absolute pleasure to be with you all tonight. Excuse me. It is my absolute pleasure to be with you all tonight to accept this award on behalf of my union, the National Health Workers Union of Liberia, and I say solidarity forever. My journey as a health worker and our journey as a union began many years ago. For too long, health workers in my country and around the world have been taken for granted. Understarving has put an unbearable burden on our shoulders. Underfunding of the health sector has left us without the resources we need to protect our communities and save lives. When I first entered the health sector as a nurse, I realized very quickly that there was only one way that we could improve the situation for us and our patients: through organizing. I am sure that this story is very familiar to so many of you here in the audience. Despite our differences across nations and around the world, we are united by a common understanding. We know that it is us, the health workers of the world, who make the world to work. We know that nothing is ever given to us, that the process is only won through struggles. And we know that when we are organized, when we will build our power. We know whenever workers are organized, we can build our powers. Nursing is in my blood. Growing up, I remember watching my aunt. Thank you. Growing up, I remember watching my aunt serve people as a nurse. When the Civil War arrived, I realized the vital importance of tending to those in need, to provide services to my loved ones, to improve the material condition for fellow citizens. But at its worst, the health system would simply not allow me to do my job properly. I was not the only one who felt this way. This was why in 2007, I got together with colleagues to fight for Liberia's first health workers union.
Our early demands were clear: more employment in the health sector, thorough conditions of work so that our best people wouldn't have to leave the country, and we could save all lives and gain our dignity, and better resources that we could use to do our jobs safely. After all, only safe workers can save lives. Yet very early, we understood that growing our power was a challenge to the power of the day. We were told that as public sector workers, we had no right to unionize. No right to unionize? How could this be? As the oldest African independent democratic republic since 1847, Liberia is a founding member of both the International Labour Organization and the United Nations. Our Constitution clearly outlines the fundamental right to freely associate in terms of politics, religion, and even the right to choose a union of our own. Liberia is the first and perhaps the only nation which has a decent work act that is fashioned in the likeness of the ILO decent work agenda. Yet during the development of this decent work act, the government sneakily excluded those working in the civil service from being covered. This means that we have workers, along with teachers and other public service workers, are currently legally prevented from unionizing. We cannot even become affiliates of our National Labor Center. This dangerous exclusion of public sector workers from the basic labor laws is in breach of international labor norms. Yet it is unfortunate for too long and for too common across the world. This day, today's date, 57 countries have ratified Convention 151 of the ILO, which reassures public sector workers the right to unionize. Very gratefully, your country, Norway, has ratified. Unfortunately, Liberia has yet to ratify that convention. Comrades, that is why we have been working with the National Teachers Association of Liberia and the Civil Service Agency, the Civil Service Agency workers, and our civil society organization, which is the organization of civil society and trade union institution, which is called CTIL in Liberia, to fight hard for public sector workers to be included in the Decent Work Act. This legal fight has been a difficult struggle, but nothing could have prepared us for the bigger storm on the horizon. It began in a small village in the remote part of my country. An elderly woman came down with a severe fever, coughing up blood, dehydrated, and with diarrhea. The first responders who arrived were unaware of the severe danger, unequipped to deal with the situation. They were among the earliest cases of the deadly Ebola outbreak which tore through my country. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. Imagine working in an underfunded, understaffed hospital facing devastation of a disease outbreak. Imagine being forced to make an impossible choice about who to treat and who to let die. Imagine coming home to your family knowing that you might be putting them at risk. Imagine nearly 1 in 10 of your colleagues violently dying. Comrades, this was the toll which Ebola took on us health workers of Liberia. Sick health workers don't save lives, and dead health workers don't save lives. A health worker must be alive to save life. The government was sending us into the fire. The government was sending us into the firing line with no protections. Our union knew we had to act. We fought tooth and nail for personal protective equipment for workers. Yet chronic underfunding meant the resources needed simply weren't available. We engaged in global advocacy, calling on governments to send vital supplies. Through our Global Union Federation, Public Services International, we received huge solidarity and support from other unions across the world, including Kommunal in Sweden. Yet the government reacted to our demands for safer conditions with hostility. Myself and 21 of my union activists were dismissed from the health service. This led to a public outcry across the country, and 20 of them were reinstated. But I and my fellow union leader, Mr. and Comrade Joseph Tamba, were kept out of re-employment. We were targeted because our leadership in organizing workers. The government thought that by getting rid of us, they could stop our movement, but they were wrong. For 4 years, we were jobless, yet we continued to organize. Our union grew. As we slowly recovered from the Ebola epidemic, we succeeded in increasing resources of our health system, more ambulances, triage centers, better protection, and our lobby for hazard pay for our members and benefits for lost health workers were successful. We share our learning from the crisis with other unions across the world. In the UK, I warned our colleagues of Unison of how their government's austerity plans will undermine frontline workers. In the USA, we received welcome support of the major SEIU union, and we lobbied the IMF and World Bank to end loan conditionalities under which public services spending are cut. We took our case all the way to the International Labour Conference of the ILO in Geneva, where the Committee of Freedom of Association examined our case. Then finally, in 2018, myself and my colleague Joseph Tamba were reinstated to our jobs in the health service. This wasn't just a victory for us and our families. It was a victory for our global movement. It showed the power of cross-border solidarity. It showed the strength which we have when we work together. We hope that by sharing the brutal lessons we learned from Ebola, we can help our country be better prepared for the crisis in the future. Our Save Workers, Save Life campaign we developed in 2018 through PSI call on governments to increase fundings, make sure that the public health emergencies arising make sure that increased fundings Our campaign of Save Workers, Save Life, which was developed in 2018 through PSI, call on governments to increase fundings and make sure that when public health emergencies arise, workers are not sacrificed in their fight. Sadly, again, the COVID-19 pandemic have shown that our warnings have not been heeded by governments. we health workers are not heroes. We should not have to become martyrs at work. We are professionals. We need personal protective equipment so we can stay alive while we serve others and save their lives. We need adequate staffing and well-resourced public health services. We need strong government funding for our sector. Fractured, profit-driven health systems are simply unable to effectively respond to crises such as Ebola or coronavirus. The only way we can protect against future outbreak is through strong government-driven public health response, best achieved through universal public health care, health for all, and health for all now. Comrades, the sad reality is far too often profits are put ahead of people. Just this week, the WTO, or the World Trade Organization, is meeting to discuss the need for global cooperations on making vaccines accessible and making patents for life-saving drug public. Ebola shown that these things cannot be left to the market. 90% of research and development funding for the COVID vaccine has come from the public sources. It's time to treat vaccine as public goods, to be used in the public interest. Yet today, while people across Europe are getting their third or fourth doses, fewer than a third of us in Liberia have had the first round of vaccines. A few wealthy countries are still listening to the pharma lobby and preventing the sharing of vaccine patents, which has slowed the global supply. It is outrageous that more than 2 years since this pandemic started, the EU Commission, Germany, the UK, and I'm so sorry to say, Norway have been putting pharmaceutical profits ahead of human lives. The World Health Organization, the Global Labor Movement, and more than 100 countries have been calling for a WTO trade waiver which will break down the barriers to production. If we cannot pass this waiver now, then what good is the WTO as international institution? We need it to learn the lesson of global solidarity and finally put people's lives first. Despite all these challenges, our struggle as health workers union continues to move forward. In 2018, we welcomed a delegation of unionists from around the world to Liberia. This delegation was led by PSR Secretary General Rosa Pavanelli, and they met with the Liberian Chief Medical Officer and both houses of the Parliament's Committees on Health and Labor. This helped to improve the social dialogue between the government of Liberia, or the Ministry of Health, and the National Health Workers Union of Liberia for a while. However, after a year, the government failed to implement all or any of the promises that they and us met in our social dialogue around the table. For this action, after 1 year of not meeting any of the conditions and coronavirus came about, the health workers decided they were going to take an action again in 2020. For this action, I was appointed as ringleader and blacklisted, despite the fact that I, at the time, was in Germany taking part in the Global Labor University program and was about to return back home when I received calls from home that there was a security threat on my life. My colleagues have faced the state police, set up peaceful protests My police faced the state police, of course. They set up peaceful protests to quell our dissent. However, other union leaders have been incarcerated in the course of just last year because they had to stand up to the power that be requesting the common things of basic conditions of work and the salary arrears. I have been told that the government agents have been looking for me, and I'm forced to stay away because of the threats. I am currently now living in the exile in West Africa, yet I know where my home is. My home is in Liberia. My home is where my union is. I do not know. I do not know when it will be safe to return home, but I want you to know that this prize for the National Health Workers Union of Liberia, sends a strong and a clear message. It tells us workers that our plight is not being ignored. It tells the Liberian government that they better not mess with our labor movement. Comrades, I never met Arthur Svensson, but I know I share with him a common understanding. We understand that injustice done to one, we understand that an injustice done to one is an injustice done to all. I want you to know that this prize isn't just about me or my union. It is a message to all of us health workers everywhere who have faced the toughest years of our working lives, and who far too often have made the ultimate sacrifice for our work. Please join me for a moment of silence in loving memory of the over 180,000 healthcare workers who lost their lives while trying to save the lives of others across the world in the pandemic. Thank you. Please have your seat, comrades. So, comrades, this award tells the world that it's time to finally listen to the voices of health workers. We have had enough of applauses. It's time for action. We all know another war is possible, a war based on solidarity, a war where unions are free to improve the lives of all working people, a war where collective bargaining and health care are treated as fundamental rights, as shown to us all. I want to thank you for this award, which in a small way makes that better war that seem for a little bit closer. We will use this award to build a strong organizing project, to curb the fear of unionization by workers fostered by the government. We will conduct robust training and organizing and prepare for generational change that will build labor power. We will create awareness within the working class to include the formal and informal sectors within our union. We will grow our alliances with like-minded trade unions and civil society organizations. For this, we are ready, but this we cannot do alone, and it requires continuing solidarity from far and near, especially for the long term. To this, we are open for partnership, and for this, we invite well-wishers to join the fight for the trade union rights in Liberia. We wish to thank the PSI for her unwavering support to the struggle over the years and for nominating us for this award. A special thanks to Rosa, Leo, and Marcelo in this regard. Thank you to the Arthur Svensson Award Committee for considering us worthy of this noble prize. To the health workers of Liberia, the unsung heroes and heroines, who are never considered worthy of anything by our employers, I salute you. For today, For today, your resilience serve your people under difficult circumstances has been recognized. Permit me to end on this note, comrades, that I dedicate my own share of this great award to my wife, my son, my daughter, and my mother, and the sister-turned mother. And I'm talking about Phoebe Diano Williams, who is my wife, Joseph Porter Williams, who is my son, Regina Porter Williams, who is my daughter, and Sarah Yeve Cooper, who is my mother, Regina Porter Maria, who helped me to go to school when I couldn't afford to go to school by myself. For these people, over the years that I sacrificed my life for the Union, I have deprived them my presence, and all of the time I stay away from them. I want them to know today that you, the workers of Norway, have recognized that absence from them, and I give this back to them. Comrades, I say solidarity, 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 solidarity forever.
A strong message from George. George is, as you know, a nurse who has devoted his life to organize and fight for health workers. Therefore, we are very happy to have with us tonight the General Secretary of the global union to which health workers' unions all over the world are associated, including NAHWUL and several Norwegian unions. I now will give the floor to Rosa Pavanelli, General Secretary of the Public Services International, representing 30 million public service workers in more than 700 unions from 154 countries. Rosa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for awarding George Poe on the nomination of PSI, the very important Arthur Svensson Award. George has said almost all about his history and how we were together. But I would like to remind how we met for the first time. And it was in March 2014 when the first outbreak of Ebola impacted on Western Africa and particularly in Liberia. And he was the one who called our attention, and he launched the alarm that this was not being just a limited event, but that it was becoming an epidemic and a threat to all the world. We raised the concern, the awareness within the WHO immediately, but it took 8 months until mid of August for the WHO to declare a global emergency, the epidemic of Ebola. And this shows how important it is to have workers organized in the working place, not only to defend their members, the working conditions of their members, but also to raise the awareness of how some events can impact on the whole society and on the whole country. And that's what NAHWUL and George did at that time. But Still, in the Ebola case, as it happened later now with the pandemic, it took months, if not years, before the world get aware and concerned about the impact of Ebola. And it was when a man traveling from Liberia back to the United States got sick with Ebola and died of Ebola. So we need to have one case in the rich part of the world to raise the awareness and people, and while neglecting the thousands of people who was suffering and dying and coping in Africa with Ebola. And it's what is happening today. After 2 years of pandemic, we are all about to have the 4th dose of our vaccine, while most part of the world, Africa first, still have to receive the first dose. And this shows how unjust, unequal is this world, and how the neoliberal policies have been disrupting the solidarity and the connection around the world. I think that what we are doing, what you are doing as a Norwegian trade union movement, and as with the Arthur Svensson Award, but also with your dedicated solidarity to support unions in the developing world and in countries where unions and workers are more in need, shows that there's an alternative. And the alternative is possible when we join together our efforts. And we call for a change, a deep change. We have seen during this year of pandemic, and we are also witnessing nowadays with the war in Ukraine, that the globalized economy that is helping just the big corporates to make profit cannot respond to the needs of the population of the world. And if we want to be able to face the challenges ahead, the challenges of the climate crisis, the challenges of new viruses and the epidemic that for sure will appear in the future. If we wanted to be ready to face the loss of jobs due to new technologies, digitalization, artificial intelligence, and all what is moving around and within us in these days, we need to be bold enough and to propose that, to say that enough is enough. It's time to put people before profit, to put people on the top of our agenda. That's why we supported the effort of George and his union. This is why we are supporting the effort of nurses and health workers around the world that have been the one, along with other public service workers, that made our communities, our cities survive during these 2 years of pandemic. And this is why we call for a strong solidarity around the world to make the change happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosa. We will have one more greeting to George and NAHWUL. Karen Bjøro is Vice President of the International Council of Nurses, a professional federation of nurses associations in 130 countries. Karen, the floor is yours.
Ærede forsamling, ladies and gentlemen, dear George Poe Williams and the National Trade Healthcare Workers Union of Liberia, on behalf of the International Council of Nurses, many of our organizations are also trade unions. I have the great honor of congratulating you on being awarded this distinguished Arthur Svensson International Prize for Trade Union Rights. Health is a human right, yet that right is undermined when governments and employers ignore the right of healthcare workers to health and decent work. Nurses and healthcare workers have been at the forefront of the outbreaks, Ebola outbreaks in Africa, and more recently, the COVID pandemic. More than 6 million people worldwide have lost their lives to COVID so far. The World Health Organization estimates that tragically, at least 180,000 healthcare workers have lost their lives to COVID in the line of duty caring for patients. And it was the healthcare workers and their organizations, their unions, that raised the collective voice around the world to demand equipment to protect themselves, often sleeping at the hospital under dire circumstances so they wouldn't take home germs to their families, often not even getting a paycheck. And to top it off, as we've heard, many healthcare workers in Africa have not even had a single dose of vaccine. Yes, there was applause in the beginning, but there has also been violence and attacks on healthcare workers. And now many healthcare workers around the world are feeling burned out and undervalued. So thank you so much, George Poe Williams, for giving voice to healthcare workers. We need more leaders like you who have the courage to speak truth to power. You have paid a high price for your speaking out. And I'm proud that you are a nurse. I'm proud that you are a healthcare worker, as we both are. Congratulations to you and the Healthcare Workers Union of Liberia. Thank you. Finally, thank you to Norsk Energi and the Arthur Svensson Foundation by awarding this year's prize to a healthcare workers union and their leaders. You are recognizing healthcare workers everywhere and emphasizing that we healthcare workers stand stronger together, and we stand stronger when you are behind us in solidarity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. We will now have a short break before Sidiki, Camara and his band starts his concert. As we now move on to a less pretentious part of the program, I will use the opportunity to thank you all for contributing to this ceremony, to make this ceremony so great. In honor of George Poe Williams and his union, NAHWUL. We have this place still for several hours, so please stay also after the concert. Have a good time, enjoy the concert, the bar is open. You may use your vouchers to get something more to drink, or you may buy a drink if you don't have more vouchers left. Use the opportunity to talk with fellow unionists. Thank you all.